through Google Plus, and you get what's called authorship. And when you see those results on the search engine page, where you might have some ads at the top, some pictures on the side, some images, and maybe a video, well, a fourth or fifth content will be authorship or blogging. So it's another way to kind of steal some space on the page. Google loves you for doing it, but if you're not already engaged in blogging and you don't plan on blogging, then Google Plus is probably going to be a little bit more difficult to pull off. But Google Plus pages appear in search results for 30% of brand term searches for brands with Google Plus pages, up from 5% in February 2012. So what that means is that if you have a brand for your sweatshirt, which I didn't come up with one for this one, but let's say you're Gilbarco Veeder-Root and you are blogging about gas pumps and you use the word Gilbarco Veeder-Root in your blog, every time somebody Googles Gilbarco Veeder-Root, 30% of that time my blog's going to come up. So you're stealing some share on the search engine 30% of the time by having that there. So if you're already blogging, very easy to just plug it into Google Plus. Might as well do it, especially if you have a website. If you're not already blogging, Google Plus is not quite there yet for an audience. But again, know your goal and know your audience. So I want to put this up there because it's cool. This is called Radian 6, and it is a social monitoring software. And what it does is you can put in your terms. So let's say we had our 6 terms and we went to Google and we ended up with 200 other terms. We put all 200 terms into the software, and it tells me who's talking about it, where they're talking about, what they're talking about. If you have a brand name, it'll show every reference to your brand name on the internet. It crawls all over the place. If you have a competitor's brand name, it'll crawl and find them. A lot of people will use it to see if people are talking poorly about your brand. So let's say, for example, I'll use that example. Let's say my sweatshirt tore the first time I put it on. You might put that phrase or something like that in there. You can see every time it ever comes up. So what you might do with that kind of data in a real world scenario is you might go to that blog and quickly say, oh, we're so sorry your sweatshirt tore. We're going to send you a new one for free. Because if you let it get out of control, you're going to have a ton of people complaining, and then you've just got some negative media. But mainly, what I want to talk about here is you can start measuring things like share of voice. So when somebody talks about a sweatshirt, how many times are they talking about your brand? For every 100 times they talk, is it 10 times or 50 times or 80 times? And then where are they talking about it? What terms do they use when they're talking about it? So you can actually start to influence how people think and talk about your brand on the internet using social media and monitoring it with tools like Radian 6. This one is not free. It's actually quite expensive. So in this scenario, we said that we've decided not to use social media for our brand. I don't know if you could tell that already, but mainly because it's too time consuming. We don't believe there's enough people on the internet to make sense for us, for Wake Forest sweatshirts at Wake Forest. I'm only one guy, I don't have time to really manage it. I don't want people having a bad experience on it, so I'm just not going to do it. However, if I want to scale up and I've got some time, we think that Pinterest, and maybe some Facebook would be potential for later, but for this campaign, we're going to skip social media, mainly because we don't have time. So, last tactic is email. So, so email. There are a couple of ways you can use email. Everybody knows what an email is, obviously, but maybe you don't understand how you can use that or how people are using it and what kinds of tools exist. So I want to talk about how you can build lists as a brand by generating subscribers like we did in our campaign, where I went to East Bay and subscribed and got my coupon, and that was awesome. Or I can harvest a list. So in this case, maybe I go to Wake Forest University and say, can I borrow your listserv? I'll give you 15% of every sale if you let me blast your students. Or you can buy a list. So let's say you go to the Winston-Salem Downtown Residents Association and say, I'll pay you $1,000 if you let me send my email to your users. So that is kind of the 3 ways that you can do that. Before you start spending money, you did your math up front and you understand, how much can you spend per lead. But at a high level, what I really wanted to talk about is what you need to be considering when you're engaging in email marketing. So know your brand associations. So if you're going to buy a list, in this case, our brand association is we're trying to get Wake Forest students. So I would want to buy a list that had a lot of Wake Forest students on it, or use a list like the Wake Forest student listserv so that I would only talk to Wake Forest students. But if you go buy a North Carolina students association list or something like that, then you just spend $10,000 or whatever on your list, and only 1% of people on it are Wake Forest. So know who you're associated with, and narrow your focus so that you make sure that people on the list are actually relevant for you, so you don't send a bunch of emails out and spend a bunch of money and a bunch of time talking to people who don't really care about buying Wake Forest sports gear. Other consideration is spam, which everybody knows what spam is. Nobody likes spam, and it's actually illegal, and you can get blacklisted for it, which means that you won't be able to send emails anymore as a company, and you can get fined for it, believe it or not. So don't spam. I'm not going to get too into detail on that, but you can actually look it up. It is an act. It's called the Can Spam Act of 2003. There's like 7 pieces of criteria that makes you spam, and if you don't meet all the criteria, you are spam. So before you start engaging and emailing, make sure you're not spamming. Otherwise, next thing you know, you might be getting fined. So no fun. Make sure you're relevant. Make sure what you're putting in your email is relevant to the person you're emailing to. So if you're emailing Wake Forest students, make sure you're talking about Wake Forest and the Wake Forest products and Wake Forest things that Wake Forest students care about. Do some A/B testing. So A/B testing is one of the great things about emailing, because let's say you have a list of 10,000. You don't have to send all 10,000 emails all at once. You can send 100 emails where your subject says, get 15% off a sweatshirt. You can send another 100 emails that says, get 10% off sweatshirts. Come to find out, just as many people open the 10% as the 15%, so I'm going to send my other 9,800 emails with 10% in the subject line, not 15%, and I learned that because I A/B tested. So that's one example, but what you're doing with A/B testing is allowing yourself to maybe change some content in the email, change your subject, and see how does that influence your open rate and how people interact with your product. So A/B testing is great. Frequency that you email. Don't send people emails all day long every day. Don't send them every other day. Pay attention to how often you send them. Make sure that you're sending them at a frequency that people actually care about. And what time of day you're sending it. A lot of people don't think about this, but something like Tuesday at 10 a.m. is the best time to send an email. I don't know if that's exactly right, but it's something like that. You're going to get X% higher open rates because you send it Tuesday at 10 a.m. So it sounds silly, but as a Wake Forest student, what time of the day are you most likely to check your email? Since you're a Wake Forest student, you can answer that, and you can think, well, maybe I should send my emails at that time too. Don't send them at 7 a.m. on a Sunday, or whatever the case. So, really, yep, this is back to our example. Don't really need to talk about it. So, as we get to the end of implementing our emailing, what kinds of things are you measuring? Basically, you're looking at how many people are actually opening your emails, how many people are clicking on what you want them to click on. So if my email says save 15% off, by using this code, how many people actually use that code with what's in it? Because most likely this code was unique to this specific email, for this specific campaign. So when they go back and they check that code, they see, well, how many people actually open the email using this language and not some other language? And then how many people are actually buying the product, converting. So if you just blast through Gmail or blast through your listserv or blast from some one-off program, you're not going to get a lot of that data. Whereas if you use actual tools, one that I would recommend for somebody who wants to do this on a small scale is Constant Contact, or maybe like MailChimp is one. Generally, it's inexpensive to get into it. We're talking like in the $15, $20, $50 a month type of range. And it will give you the data and the tools needed to be able to do some of this A/B testing and get a better understanding. Whereas if you're just blasting through a list, you have no idea who opened it. You can't really split it, at least not automatically. You can't do some of that higher level measuring. So for example, this is actually a Constant Contact dashboard where I can see how many I sent, how many of them bounced, how many of them said I was spam, how many people opted out, how many people opened it, how many people clicked on it, and so on. You can see how many people forwarded it. You can see all kinds of data, and use that data to go back and maybe change your subject, change your offer, change the picture you use, change how many words is in it. If you're doing a lot of emailing and you have a lot of people to email, you can get statistical relevance very quickly by doing some A/B testing. In this scenario, we got Wake Forest to agree that if we give them 15% of every sale, we can blast their list once a month. So we blast 20,000 contacts. 20% of them open the emails. That's historic. I made this up. That's historical data from the university. The university will tell you. When I blast emails, generally speaking, 20% of people open it, and 20% or 2% of the time they actually click on it. So you would, whoever's list that you're using, if they can't give you that data, you probably don't want to use their list because they probably don't know what they're doing. Usually you can get that data very easily, and especially if you're buying a list, they'll tell you how many is it going to go to, how often do they get open, what are your standard historical click-through rates. So you can start understanding that every time I do a blast once a month, I'm going to get 40 conversions on that blast. Half of those guys are actually going to buy, so I'm going to get 14 sales per month, and I'm only going to have to spend $7.50 per sale. So going back to our list here, we already were way over our target for the month, but I only have to spend $7.50. It's not that hard to set an email, so I'm going to go ahead and do it. So I'm going to get my extra 14 emails a month. So, and we're going to look at the cost. So back up here, really up here is what we're looking at. We still have $40 of margin left in the product. So if I spend $7.50 on that, still making money on the product, not a big deal. Sounds pretty basic here because we're talking about a $50 sweatshirt, but if you're talking about a $75,628 product with a 13% margin or something like that, and you've got some math that's not straight math, then, and let's say you only want to give up 2% of your margin to sell it, then you start getting a little bit trickier, and these calculators start making a little bit more sense, and you start understanding that maybe $7.50 doesn't make sense, or maybe it does. So I definitely put in some easy math, but the point for this really is that with some calculators, you can quickly understand if I'm going to spend X amount of money on this list, is that going to actually add up? So we get to our end of our campaign, we discover that for zero money, I'm going to generate 58 leads from SEO. For $10.27 a sale, I'm going to generate 146 leads a month. For social, we're not going to do it. For email, we're going to sell at $7.50 of cost per, we're going to sell 14. So over the 6-month period, with an average sales price of $50, the campaign will sell 218 sweatshirts a month, and I'm going to make 1,308 sales for $65,400 in revenue. My cost of goods sold was $13,080. My marketing cost was just under my $10,000 at $9,626.52. So I just made $42,000 selling sweatshirts on the internet in 6 months. So that is a very high-level, basic overview of how you can use data, free data that Google will provide to you, do some research and put together a real campaign using real data that actually exists, and know with some degree of certainty if you do X, you will get Y. And that essentially is the benefit of digital marketing, which I believe, last slide. So let's say you still got $400 left, or you still got a little bit of energy left, or you want to say, well, what could I have done more? How could I scale this up? Well, you could have bought some other email lists. You could have used other keywords in your PPC. You could look at your impressions share, and you could find out, which I'm not going to dig too far into, but you could find out that, if I spend another $2 per lead, I could have sold another 100 sweatshirts a month. You can find that out. You can start improving your conversion rates by having better content. But the point is that you can use these tools to learn how to scale and how to understand, should I spend my time, should I spend my money, or whatever, to sell more sweatshirts on the internet. And that is all.
Looking from a fire hose there, but I hope you guys picked up some really good stuff. Does anybody have any questions on what we covered tonight and how we got there?
I had an experience with using email blasts, and it was hard. Our open rates were less than 1%.
Wow.
And we were finding that most of our emails were ending up in spam. They were getting screened by the filter. What were we doing wrong?
So if you're ending up most of your emails in spam, you either have something in your email that's flagging a spam filter. So different keywords in your subject, keywords in your text. If you use too much bold font, if you use all caps, things like that will throw flags. But usually what's happened in that kind of a scenario is your server's been blacklisted. So usually what that means is that somebody at some point has used that mail server to send out a lot of spam.
Yeah.
And enough people have reported to the internet service provider that spam comes from that IP address, and you've just been blacklisted. So you can actually find that out pretty easily.
Well, we were using a server farm in India, and that.
Yeah, that would probably do it.
The questions? Okay, so I'll make this available for you guys to look at, and I know that several people had classes tonight, so we'll get it available for those people who had classes as well. If you want the actual tools, Daniel has agreed to share the actual spreadsheet tool that he had, that he kept coming back to, that showed you the numbers you needed to sell by month. So if any of you, are active entrepreneurs who are looking to actually start trying to use this right now, that tool can also be available to you to plug in and use. Okay?
Also, I'm glad to field questions after the fact. You can either email me or you can find me on LinkedIn or whatever the case.
Or you can come down here and
Or
bombard.
you can come down here and bombard me.
We mentioned
Uh,
sign sheet.
Yes, if you haven't signed in on the way in, but I think most of you did, there are sign-up sheets out there, so make sure you sign on for extra credit or for what, just general attendance.